This podcast is dedicated to the memory of David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Farron, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein, and to Michael Mageau and Brian Hartnell. This is Zodiac speaking, a classic Gunpoint Camp podcast. I'm your host, Chris Garcia. Of all the victims of murder who have never been found, the one that interests me the most when related to Zodiac is Donna Lass. And a number of missing people who are assumed murdered from about 70 to 75 were often looked at in ties to Zodiac. But Donna Lass is the one that someone attached to the crime. And there's a number of theories about this. The problem is, without a body, there can be no knowledge of what happened, and thus it's impossible to tie an MO. There is the postcard, the Sierra Club postcard that's often referred. But there's also, in 1999, I believe, one of the Zodiac researchers was interviewing a San Francisco PD member who supposedly sent the postcard. So it's hard to say. The question of the letters is not an all or nothing. It is a this and that. The only one I would say for sure was sent by the killer was Paul Stein, because of the inclusion of the shirt. We do know that whoever killed at Lake Berryessa also matches that handwriting and left physical written evidence at the scene. But Donna Lass is so much harder because she was never found, and the only real tie is that postcard. But Donna Lass herself, she's fascinating. The ties to Zodiac other than the postcard are very weak. One, again, a single victim, potentially. Two, no body. He never took the time to hide a body before, as far as we know. Again, you look at the Santa Barbara murders. There was an attempt to hide the body. Lake Tahoe, by the way, is a great place to dispose of a body. You have the lake itself, just weigh it down. It may never be found. It's so deep, so cold. But two, and I think this one's more important, the entire area around it is, while well-traveled, full of animal life. Coyotes, bears, I think there are even badgers. It's a great place to dispose of a body and likely buy yourself at least days, if not months or years. Donna Lass was 25. And the last place she was seen was Sahara's in State Line, Nevada, which is one of the casinos, of course. One of the interesting things about that is there has been a lot of crime actually in Lake Tahoe over the years, partly because of the just casino culture always draws in a certain type. Two, there is a undercurrent of organized crime that actually has existed in Lake Tahoe even before it became a sort of a tourist mecca. And three, people preying on tourists is the other one. But what's really fascinating is Donna Lass returned home. The last place she was seen was leaving the Sahara in the company of to quote a newspaper article from the time, was seen walking with a young blonde man near the apartment she had rented the day before and had never lived in. So she had just moved. And she had worked at the Sahara from at 2 p.m. on September 6, 1970. And she left, but her car was parked at her apartment. And there was nothing missing. her purse, which was obviously with her, and the clothes she was wearing. There was no struggle, nothing. Now, this is what interests me, and why I don't think it was Zodiac, more than anything. If someone was casing the apartments, or casing her herself, and knew she was going to move, that would be the opportune time to strike. We don't have evidence, with the possible exception of Darlene Ferrin, that any of the people who the Zodiac targeted had been previously spied on, had been inspected. This, to me, reeks of a killer that is aware of his target and wants to find an opportune time to get at them. And here's an interesting statement, actually, from the South Lake Tahoe Police Chief, Ray Letizian, I think it's how it be pronounced. And someday I'm going to do a podcast called Sierra High Crimes. And it's going to delve into the stuff that has happened around Lake Tahoe and other parts of the Sierra, because there's a lot of great stories. Just got to find someone who was like true crime fan and up in that location. I might actually put out a call for that soon. If you are someone who lives up in the Sierras, in Lake Tahoe specifically, give me a dangle. But here's what the police chief said. From the beginning, we have believed she was abducted and is dead. It was not in her character to drop out. She was, in the true sense of the word, a good girl. Now let's set aside the fact that this statement is very much of the time. But one of the interesting notes here is that there was no sign previous to this that she was looking to run away. The renting the new apartment is an excellent example. I think this is a highly doubtful Zodiac crime, but I do think that the Zodiac, this tells one thing about the Zodiac that's absolutely true. He was monitoring true crime information around the state. And on my next episode, Kathleen Johns, I'll very much be looking into that. So stay tuned.